The greatest prison escapes in history. Prison walls are supposed to be unbreakable, but history keeps proving otherwise. These are the wildest, boldest, and most ingenious prison escapes ever pulled off. Alcatraz Escape, 1962, USA. On June 11th, 1962, something extraordinary happened inside Alcatraz, a prison sitting on a lonely island right off San Francisco. That night, 3 inmates, Frank Morris, a 35-year-old bank robber with a sharp mind and a history of breakouts, and brothers John and Clarence Anglin, both in their early 30s who were also imprisoned for bank robbery, escaped. Guards doing their rounds at midnight thought the men were asleep, but what they really saw were dummies made of soap and plaster with barbershop hair glued on top. The trick worked, and the prisoners were already gone by the time everything was discovered. Here's what happened. For half a year, the men had been carving holes behind the air vents of their cells using spoons and other scraps. Those holes led to a utility corridor, which gave them access to the roof. From there, they slipped past searchlights, climbed fences, and made their way down to the dark shoreline. Hidden at the water's edge was their masterpiece, a homemade raft and life jackets stitched together from more than 50 stolen raincoats. Yes, they actually managed to turn raincoats into survival gear, complete with seams glued and sewn by hand. That night, they inflated the raft and paddled into the freezing, fast currents of San Francisco Bay. A fourth partner, Alan West, was left behind when his escape hole jammed shut with hardened cement. By the next morning, when guards tried to wake the men, all they found were the eerily realistic dummy heads and empty cells. The escape triggered a massive manhunt, but no bodies were ever found. The FBI eventually declared the men drowned, yet the U.S. Marshals still keep their case open. To this day, no one knows if Morris and the Anglin brothers perished in the bay or vanished into freedom. That escape was all about brains and patience, but the next story cranks the danger up because some prisoners didn't just sneak away, they rose up and fought back. Sobibor Death Camp. Revolt and Escape, 1943, Poland. On October 14, 1943, inside the Sobibor extermination camp in Nazi-occupied Poland, prisoners made a desperate choice: fight or be killed. Jewish inmates, many of them Soviet prisoners of war, POWs, secretly organized a revolt after learning the camp was about to be shut down and everyone inside executed. Leon Felhindler, a Polish Jew, and Alexander Pachersky, a Soviet Red Army officer, became the leaders of the plan. The prisoners knew tunneling was hopeless because of guards and minefields, so they came up with another strategy. They lured German officers into workshops one by one under simple excuses like new clothes or repairs, then killed them quietly with axes and knives made in secret. Over the course of an hour, they managed to take down about 11 SS officers and several guards without alerting the whole camp. Then came the breakout. At roll call, hundreds of prisoners rushed the gates pretending to be a work group, while others tried to cross the minefields. It was chaos. Some were gunned down instantly, and others died in explosions, but more than 300 prisoners actually made it out. In the end, most escapees were hunted down in the following weeks, but about 50 survived the war by joining partisan groups or hiding with local families. The revolt was so disruptive that the Nazis dismantled Sobibor soon after to cover their tracks. The escape remains one of the most powerful examples of courage and resistance in the darkest days of the Holocaust. From a desperate revolt to ingenious persistence, our next section in World War II shows how prisoners turned escaping into a full-time job. The Great Escape, 1944, World War II. On the night of March 24th, 1944, at Stalag Luft III, a high-security prisoner of war camp in Nazi Germany, 76 Allied airmen pulled off what became known as the Great Escape. The mastermind behind was squadron leader Roger Bushell, nicknamed Big X, who organized hundreds of fellow prisoners into a massive operation designed to outsmart their German captors. The plan was to dig tunnels, but not one. They managed to dig 3 tunnels nicknamed Tom, Dick, and Harry, so if one was discovered, the others might still succeed. These tunnels went about 30 feet underground to avoid detection and stretched nearly 300 feet long enough to reach the woods beyond the camp fences. The prisoners used wooden bedboards to support the walls, set up a rail cart system to haul dirt, wired stolen lights for electricity, and even built ventilation pipes so they could breathe underground. At the same time, others were sewing disguises, forging documents, and drawing maps so escapees could blend in once they got out. On the chosen night, 76 men crawled through the tunnel, Harry, and slipped out into the forest. The plan had been for hundreds more, but bottlenecks in the narrow tunnels slowed everything down. Despite all the effort, only 3 men made it safely back to Allied territory. Most of the rest were recaptured, and in a shocking act of cruelty, 50 were executed on Hitler's orders. Still, the Great Escape stands as one of the most daring acts of resistance during World War II. It showed extraordinary teamwork, engineering genius, and bravery, and it inspired books and movies that turned the story into legend. And hey, if you're enjoying these wild escape stories, make sure you hit subscribe. Think of it as your own secret tunnel to the next adventure, only with way less dirt and danger. That breakout felt like something from a movie, but the next story takes us to a real castle, where escaping wasn't just luck, but a craft perfected over years. Colditz Castle escapes, World War II, Germany. Colditz Castle, known in World War II as Oflag 4C, sat high on a hill in Germany and looked like something out of a fairy tale, except it was one of the toughest prisoner of war camps the Nazis ran. It held Allied officers who had already tried escaping from other camps, so the Germans thought the huge stone walls and remote location would finally stop them. They were wrong. From 1940 to 1945, the castle saw around 130 escape attempts. Some failed before they even got started, but 32 men actually made it to freedom. These escapes took every trick in the book. Prisoners dug tunnels from latrines, forged German papers, sewed disguises, and even built an actual glider nicknamed the Colditz Cock in the attic, hoping to launch off the castle roof. The glider never got to fly before the war ended, but later tests proved it could have worked. One of the most famous successes came in 1942 when Harry Neve, a British Army officer, disguised himself as a German and walked right out of the castle gates. Others managed to slip away through hidden tunnels or by fooling guards with fake documents. What made Colditz remarkable was the creativity. Officers from Britain, the US, Canada, Poland, and other nations all pooled their skills, engineering, art, carpentry, to keep the escape attempts going. For many, escaping wasn't just about freedom, it was a duty. When American forces liberated the castle in 1945, Colditz had already earned its place in history as the ultimate escape school. The daring plans from tunnels to a homemade glider turned it into legend. War ends. But jailbreak creativity doesn't. Let's rewind to a gangster who walked out with a wooden gun. John Dillinger Escape, 1934, USA. In the middle of the Great Depression, one man embarrassed an entire prison without even firing a shot. On March 3, 1934, John Dillinger, America's most wanted bank robber, pulled off his legendary escape from the supposedly escape-proof Lake County Jail in Crown Point, Indiana. He didn't use explosives or a real gun, just a piece of wood shaped and painted to look like a pistol. Here's how it went down. Dillinger waved his wooden gun, convincing guards and even a trusty prisoner that it was real. With nerves of steel, he forced guards into cells, grabbed the keys, and took control of the jail. Reports say he even sang as he walked out, as if the whole thing was just a performance. Along the way, he and his accomplice stole the sheriff's own car and drove off without a single shot being fired. Behind the trick was more than just craftiness. Some officers may have been bribed, and Dillinger's lawyer and contacts likely helped get the fake gun smuggled in. But what stood out most was his confidence and showmanship, turning a block of wood into the ultimate stage prop. After the escape, Dillinger went back to Chicago and his life of robberies, quickly becoming public enemy number one. His freedom didn't last long, though. By July 1934, FBI agents caught up with him outside the Biograph Theater and shot him dead. Or at least, that's the official story. Some still believe Dillinger slipped away that night, but fingerprint evidence confirmed it was him. That was one man's magic trick. Now, in the next section, watch an army of escapees storm the exits. Maze Prison Escape, 1983, Northern Ireland. On September 25th, 1983, the Maze Prison in Northern Ireland, thought to be one of the most secure in Europe, witnessed the biggest escape in British history. 38 prisoners, all members of the Provisional Irish Republican Army, IRA, managed to break out of H Block 7 in a plan that looked more like a military operation than a prison escape. The plan was months in the making, led by Larry Marley, a veteran escape planner. Along with organizers like Bobby Story and Jerry Kelly, the prisoners studied guard routines and security weaknesses. They even smuggled 6 handguns inside the prison, no small feat in such a high security place. The key to their plan was the prison's food delivery lorry, which came and went without thorough searches. On the afternoon of September 25th, the inmates struck. Armed with smuggled guns, they seized control of H Block 7, taking guards hostage. Some guards were injured in the chaos, and one officer tragically died of a heart attack. Disguised in stolen uniforms, the prisoners forced the food lorry driver to cooperate and packed themselves inside. At around 3:25 p.m., the lorry rolled through the prison gates with 38 disguised escapees hidden in plain sight. The breakout was a huge propaganda victory for the IRA, and it embarrassed the British government, leading to calls for resignations and immediate reforms in prison security. Though many escapees were recaptured in the following years, the Mays escape remains a staggering example of how careful planning, teamwork, and daring could crack even the tightest prison walls. From politics to pure crime, the next crew turns a breakout into a multi-state manhunt. The Texas 7, 2000 USA. On December 13, 2000, 7 inmates pulled off one of the most shocking prison escapes in modern U.S. history. It happened at the John B. Connolly Unit, a maximum security prison in Texas, and the escapees would quickly become known as the Texas 7. These weren't small-time offenders. They were serving long and heavy sentences for violent crimes, with ringleader George Rivas facing 18 life sentences. The plan had been brewing for months. On the morning of the breakout, the group overpowered civilian workers and guards, tying them up and stealing uniforms, identification cards, and weapons. In total, they made off with 14 handguns, a shotgun, an AR-15 rifle, and plenty of ammunition. The guards were left locked in a room, helpless, while the prisoners disguised themselves as staff. Using a stolen prison truck, they rolled straight out of the gates. Once free, the Texas 7 didn't go into hiding quietly. They robbed stores, stole more weapons, and tried to keep ahead of law enforcement. Their most infamous crime came on Christmas Eve, when they held up a sporting goods store in Irving, Texas. During the robbery, a responding police officer named Aubrey Hawkins was shot and killed, turning the escape into a national manhunt. Over the next 6 weeks, police tracked the fugitives across multiple states. 6 were eventually recaptured in January 2001, while one, Michael Rodriguez, died by suicide. The surviving members were later sentenced to death for the murder of Officer Hawkins. Many have since been executed, making the Texas 7 a grim reminder that not all escapes are clever tricks. Some spiral into deadly violence. And if you still think modern prisons are airtight, let us now see the man who tunneled under all of it. El Chapo's tunnel escape, 2015, Mexico. On July 11, 2015, Mexico's most notorious drug lord, Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, vanished from his cell in the country's most secure prison. The Altiplano Federal Penitentiary was supposed to be escape-proof, yet El Chapo slipped away in a fashion so bold it stunned the world. He didn't climb fences or trick guards. He went underground. Here's how. Under the shower floor of his cell was a hidden hole leading to a tunnel more than a mile long. This wasn't just any tunnel. It had lights, ventilation, and even a motorcycle mounted on rails so he could speed through it. Dug by his cartel's engineers, guided by GPS coordinates smuggled in with the help of family, the tunnel stretched all the way to a construction site outside the prison walls. That night, cameras last caught him walking into the shower. Minutes later, he was gone. By the time guards checked, El Chapo was already racing through the tunnel on the motorcycle and emerging into freedom. The breakout triggered roadblocks, airport shutdowns, and a massive manhunt. But he stayed on the run for nearly 6 months before being captured again in January 2016. The escape was a massive embarrassment for Mexican authorities and showed just how much power and reach the Sinaloa cartel had. It was also El Chapo's second successful prison break, which only added to his legend. His tunnel, complete with rails and airflow, remains one of the most jaw-dropping escapes in history. A modern twist on an age-old dream of freedom. And that brings us to the end of our journey through the greatest prison escapes ever recorded. Proof that when determination meets creativity, even the most secure walls can crumble. And hey, if you love this ride through history's greatest getaways, make sure you hit subscribe.